Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights and tips to help you with your business challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered, or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. And my guest today is a trainer and facilitator. He's also a radio presenter, interviewer, a game show host no less, and a professional event MC. He's over 3 decades of experience to draw from and is comfortable in just about any audience-facing situation, which makes a big change, I can tell you. And he also runs his own business in the field of leadership and management training. I'm delighted to welcome Brian Barry to the You and Your Business studio. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Alec, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, more than welcome. Delighted to. Well, I think our audience will have picked up fairly quickly that it's not quite an Irish accent you're sporting there, but let's take you back to your last year in school and then that'll help explain it all.
Ah, yes. Well, yeah, with a name like Brian Barry, I've often been asked, am I from Cork? And then my answer is, I've only been there once.
Right.
So no, not that Irish, although I've been living here for a good few years and I love it. My last year in school, as the first 40 years of my life, was spent in South Africa. More specifically, school was in a town called Rustenburg, and it's known for having the biggest platinum mines in the world. And also a place called Sun City, or the Lost City, which is close by, is a holiday resort with an inland sea, no less. Man-made, of course, but very, very nice place to go to. Yeah, finishing school, I went to a technical high school, which I am always happy about. I wanted to go to academic, but the technical one taught me many life skills, you know, things that you can, when you need a screwdriver and you know how to use it, then that's far more valuable than what any accountant can teach you.
Well, that's dead right. But you always had an interest in sort of media, so you got involved in being a DJ.
Yeah. Ever since school, I was a DJ when there were school functions and outings and get-togethers and school dances. I would do music for that. My biggest dream was to be a DJ on one of the biggest national stations in the country called 5FM, and a few others as well. I didn't get there that big, but I did join a local community station in Rustenburg. It was called Mafisa FM. Mafisa is a Sotho word or a Tswana word, which means something to do with greatness. And so I was there for a good few years, voluntary, and had to do, get income from my DJ work.
Fantastic. But I think you discovered, like a lot of people who are quite young and get involved in DJ work, is you're working when your friends are not, and they're not working when you are.
That's it. Yeah, it's vice versa. You have, the beauty of a DJ is you have every day off,
Yeah, right.
but that means everybody else is at work. And then on a Friday and Saturday night and many weeknights when they're all having a party, they often come to your party. But if they want to go and see a live act or a band or a movie, you can't go with them. And in the day when you have all the time to go and do things, they're kind of busy. So I thought, this can't carry on. I need to get a day job, that can pay me a salary, whether I take leave or not, whether I am away or whether I am sick. So I got into IT. I got into an organization that did a lot of outsourcing work for larger organizations.
Right.
They were quite trend-setting at the time. And they had customers that were, some of them were big telecoms companies like the likes of Vodafone. Now in South Africa, it's known as Vodacom.
Right.
And I joined their IT team there.
Why IT?
I've always had an affinity to anything technical, anything technological. So like, for instance, when mobile phones came out and all these type of things, gadgetry, I'm an early adopter when it comes to those. I always want to know what's going on. I'll watch even now still, when Apple launches a new iPhone, even though we know they're all the same, I still have a look and see, okay, well, what exactly is different, So that was me. So I thought, you know what, get into IT. The job I got was kind of like the lower end of IT. It's like crawling under people's desks and plugging in computers back in the day when nothing was wireless, everything was wired.
Yeah. Okay, so you're Okay, you've started on the bottom rung of the ladder, but you were going to be moving up bit by bit.
Yes, I did. I started doing training, and because I realized that the people that I was helping often came with computer problems, and there was this issue which in the computer industry it's known as PEBCAC, PEBCAC, which is an acronym for problem exists between keyboard and chair, or computer and chair. So I started doing a bit of training to teach people, right, this is how you use it properly. And I had to teach them how to use certain programs. And from there, my affinity to train or stand in front of an audience started growing. And the company saw my wealth, my value rather, and they started giving me more and more to do. And eventually I moved over to one of the departments as a full-time trainer. And I eventually moved over to that organization. They scooped me up and said, look, come work for us directly. And I was a national trainer. So I would fly around the country in South Africa, from Johannesburg to Cape Town, to Durban, to Port Elizabeth, to Bloemfontein, sometimes 3 cities in one day, to go and deliver training on products and services. And of course, then soft skills, things like managing teams and communication, the lack of emotional intelligence, which some people had, how to deal with customers, all these kind of things.
Sure. I suppose, what would you say is the real skill? Because there's so many people out there training, but we often run into them and are sorry at the time that they seem to lack something. What do you think that generally is?
It's a passion for what you're talking about, I'd say. It's a passion and understanding what it is. I know many people that are a freelance trainer. I don't like to use that word because it has free in it, and I like to get paid for what I do. So they say, oh, I could just walk in and train everything. Yes, but all they do is regurgitate information. They just read slides off the screen or read from a book. I can do that.
Yes.
You really have to have a passion for what you are. And the fact that when I was a trainer back in the day, I moved up through the ranks again. I soon became a regional supervisor and then a national manager. And having led teams, teams that were on the ground, middle management teams, I now look back and when I'm teaching others on managerial skills and managerial knowledge, I look back at what I did wrong back then, and I think, wow, there's a situation, and how could I have handled it better? And I use that knowledge and experience and the passion I have for what I'm talking about. When I get new information in, or a new customer, and they ask questions that doesn't quite fit into what I have, I go and develop new content. And I love doing that because you learn so much more and you grow so much more. And I think that's a big differentiator between those that just do it for it's a paycheck, and those that actually love to do it.
And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Brian Barry. And we're just talking about, those who have a passion for training as opposed to those who just regurgitate information. And I suppose that's very important, because obviously you want this information to stick with people. And tell us where this was going to take you next in your world travels, not necessarily to Ireland yet, but what you were doing.
Yeah, I moved up. I then decided I got tired of training, and because the information I think was all the same. That was pretty much the real reason as I look back in time. I then decided to go and study a marketing degree, and I did that, and I got a little bit into it, and I realized, no, it's way too much admin for my liking. So I then took the two skills, the knowledge that I had from marketing and my experience in training, and I put it together in an enablement job, and joined another telecoms organization. They were called Telkom. The Irish equivalent would be AIR.
Okay.
And I dealt with corporate salespeople, and I helped them package the right answer depending on their customers. Some of them may have a corporate customer today and a retail customer the next. You might have an SME, and there's always different forms and different sales pitches depending on what you say. And I put things together and I really helped them. And we had a nice big project called Connect with Mobile. And I taught them how to use the power of mobile and introduced them to the latest and greatest, whatever technology there were, to help them, to further them, and to sell their wares.
But they were well ahead of their time, weren't they? Because they had a workforce spread all over South Africa and so had to communicate with them on a regular basis. And this was also going to provide opportunities for you.
Yes, instead of having, like most companies would have, a town hall every month, just invite everybody into a room. The organization was very large. They had roughly 15,000 staff at that time, and they were spread out across many cities and towns. So they had their own studios, much like RTE would, and that quality as well. So
Right.
you'd be in the studio with green screens and all that kind of stuff, things that people have now become accustomed to thanks to the likes of Zoom. But back then it was still only a professional TV station that had those type of things. And we would address the entire company, from the guys on the road to people in the office. And I would do interviews with product managers, division managers, directors, the MD, the CEO himself, have a to and fro. And they used me for this particular department that I was in, the business mobile department, as their key kind of MC and presenter person.
And that must have been great because it gave you great experience and exposure to the organization. But I must say it was a great forethought of them because they were including sort of ads for their own people in there as well.
Yep. So we were boosting and telling the company what was happening. Often in any corporate company, those that work in a certain division very seldomly touch what happens in another. Take functions like HR and finance. They hardly ever know what's going on outside the organization or outside their office. So they got to see, oh, that's what's happening in sales, and that's the new product. Much like the launches that the big corporates do these days, the big organizations, when there's a new device or a new car or a new technology, So we were doing that, but internally.
Yes. And that was fantastic because it was so beneficial to all of the employees, and also it gave you great exposure and skills and knowledge around the whole area of media.
Correct. And I also did radio. They had a retail radio station. So they had retail stores, and the radio that you would listen wasn't some of the local stations. It was a radio designed with music and adverts and content solely for the staff and for customers. So I did a thing called Train Your Brain every Wednesday morning for the hour before the store opened. Staff would be there to come and set up and clean up and everything. And they could then listen to me, like also interviewing product specialists, the latest and greatest in handsets and technology that were coming out. So I was teaching people back in the day when BlackBerry was first launched, when the iPhone was first launched,
Right.
all these things, 4G and 3G and broadband. I was there and teaching people this is the future. And looking back over the last 25 years, it was literally 20 years ago when I was telling people, soon you'll have a device in your hand and you can literally do video calls with it. And here we are, we're doing it. It's every day.
Isn't that amazing? It's amazing how far ahead that they were of the times. And again, you would have seen the benefits of that to the organization.
Yeah, and then my time in South Africa came to an end. My wife and I decided to spread our wings, and we moved in 2015. We came to Ireland, and I'd never been here. I didn't know anybody. My wife had a job because she got kind of transferred as such. And I said, cool, I'll make it happen. Now,
Sure.
I had to wait for a visa to allow me to work. So I was the stay-at-home dad, the home carer and childminder. And I
Right.
take my hat off to those. Never, ever say to a stay-at-home parent that, they've got the day off. Trust me, that's a hard enough job. I
No.
often wished, can I just go back to the office?
Yes, of course, of course. But you and I have something in common. We're great believers in networking, and this was going to be one of the sort of pillars on which you could build yourself up in Ireland. You'd done it already in South Africa.
Yeah, I had a huge network of people. I mean, I could phone anybody anywhere in so many industries, but I was in Ireland and I was a very small fish, again, in a large pond for where I was. But I had to network, and I started looking around, and I knew I needed to get into the speaking game. And I came across the PSA, the Professional Speaking Association, and it was around summer 2016 that I joined, and that's where I met yourself, Alec.
There we
And
go.
as they say, the rest is as you see it.
The rest is as you see it. So can we just talk a bit about networking? Because I know from you, you're quite a consummate networker, and you and I have worked together on projects. So would you have a couple of tips to give business people out there about networking?
Yeah, the biggest tip is networking in itself. Is network. Even if you're at an event, you know, I read something just the other day. Sitting at home won't expose you to anything, you know. So you need to be exposed. And even if you're going to a network event, don't sit in the back row and have a look at everybody. You know, I always say embrace it. Go in there, greet people, be there early and stay late. Meet as many people as you can, and meet as high up as you can in an organization. For instance, if you get to meet the CEO or the managing director of any organization, this is a place where you often get to meet them on a one-to-one basis. And you can network with them. And if you ever need anything, you've got a link into that organization or that industry sometimes. So networking is all I can say. Mingle with the senior executives, the senior leadership as high as you can, because they can open doors for you. They're the influential ones. And if you're inside an organization right now and you're but an employee or a junior manager, network as high up as you can, because they'll open doors for you. Get a mentor, get someone that has seen and has experienced bigger and better things than you have, and they'll teach you, and they'll pass on that experience and learn from others in the industry, because that's the only way you can get ahead.
Sure.
And learn the good and the bad.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Brian Barry. And we were just talking about some of the nuances of networking. And Brian and myself are very much, I think, on the same page here. And of course, networking is not selling, and it's not trying to sell yourself or make yourself.
No. Networking is trying to just to network, just to find out what the other person is about. And building up a relationship, much like dating, you know, you want to know a little bit about the other person, and you want to take it little by little, because if you're just going to come storming in there and say, hey, this is me and I can do this, that, and the next thing, people think you're just trying to sell to them and they're going to ignore you. If you have no agenda other than just to connect with the person and get to know them, that'll take you much further.
I like Dave. Sorry, go on, Brian.
One thing I can say is, you know, a lesson I've learned is try and stay away from negative people, though, because they'll have a problem for every solution.
I love that. I have a problem for every solution. Yeah. As I say about negative people, never walk away from somebody who's negative. Run.
I like that, yeah.
And it's Dale Carnegie who said it, which I've always loved as well. People are most interested in those who are interested in them.
That's it. You know, if I come to you and I introduce myself and I want to find out what you do and where you are in a conversational approach, not like a news reporter with a little list there of 7 questions. Now, there's nothing wrong with preparing your 7 questions, but you don't come out there with a notepad, you know. Yes. Kind of rehearse them and have a normal general conversation. And if someone goes off on a tangent about something else, that's great, because you learn more from that person. And you could always try and schedule another meeting to learn more from them.
Yes, and ask open questions and be interested.
That's it. So in Ireland, having been here literally from never been here in 2015, 2016, I had to start networking, as we mentioned. Sure. I then did a few jobs. I thought I would go into sales. Even though I've dealt with salespeople all my life, I was never in a sales role. So I did a few sales jobs, and I had to start at the bottom, walk the streets, as they say, and earn my stripes. And but the nice thing about that was that it taught me much more about the Irish culture, the everyday person, than I could have ever learned in any corporate office. As I often say to people, especially my wife, so you sit in a corporate office and you mind your P's and Q's, and there's always an HR department to run to. When it's just you out on the street and someone wants to tell you to get out, he'll tell you, you know. So that's where you learn to get to know the real people, and you get the nuances and the little the wording and, what does it mean and what does it not mean.
Sure.
So it stood me in good stead. And I did sales in motor cars. I did sales in health products. I did sales in broadband. I did sales in radio advertising. And again, the network I've built up over the few years that I've lived here by then was immense, and it stood me in good stead. And in 2019, I decided, you know what, it's time to spread my wings again and go on my own, and do what I do now. And that was start my own organization to help others to speak better, to speak up and stand out.
Yes.
Be that MC for events, for corporate events, outdoor events, MC for trade shows and the likes, anything that comes up where people need an MC, and really kind of practice what I preach, and then people can see me. And that's also where you are best able to sell your wares, because people can see what you do and they can see, I want to be like that, or I need help with that. And I then built up a few connections, a few contracts. We had a good few contracts coming up for training again,
Right.
Customer experience training, leadership training. That was late 2019. And then going into 2020, as those were almost signed, need I even say it, the world came to a bit of a pause. I'll say it politely. Yeah. So yeah, then came the big pause, as we called it. And the idea was then, hey, everything was online. And fortunately, from my background, it was not new to me. I could just jump on the first video call I had and was able to, and I could then use my skill in teaching others. Well, here's a thing called Zoom and Teams and all these type of things. And I could teach them, this is how you use it. This is what you should do, shouldn't do. So I could keep my business running, albeit at a fraction of the original idea, but I could keep networking, and I could stay connected.
But isn't it amazing when you join the dots and you think back to your times in South Africa, working with the sort of the TV type station on the radio station, the internal one, that those skills that you honed and learned there would come back into play again. Yeah,
that's it. And I even did Zoom calls for my colleagues back in South Africa who were still running their sales teams. They knew I had a lot of worth. So despite the small time difference, I would do talks with them and their sales guy. And then this is also during this time when I met a few people who I now do a lot of work with, and their organizations who were growing at the time, and they needed additional help. And there was a gap for me. So what I do most days these days is facilitation, training facilitation in leadership, management, communication, sales. We started off online, did a lot of online. As many people, I had the Zoom fatigue. You'd get to the end of the day and think to yourself, geez. And it was great because some organizations would have people, I remember it well, in one day, I literally went around the world where I had people as far as Las Vegas to the west and as far as Singapore to the east, all on one call. And I had to do 2 sessions because you had to focus on the eastern side of the world in the morning and the western side in the afternoon, just so that people weren't up at 2 a.m. Fantastic. And that then eventually evolved into physical face-to-face training. So there's people that I've now been doing work for the last 2-3 years, having started from an online side right down to a face-to-face in the classroom, physical training facilitation.
So that's what you're doing now. I suppose in the 3 minutes that we've left, and believe it or not, that's how quickly these things go. Just talk about maybe some of the main attributes of leadership and what you're trying to impart. As I said, we only have 3 minutes, but let's talk about that. Then we'll ask people where they can find out more about you.
No problem. Leadership is an action. It's not just a title. People tend to think, oh no, leadership is a certain select people. Anybody can be a leader, and most people are leaders. When you take the lead to do something, even in a social situation, leadership is an action. Right. But beware, your tongue might not have any bones in it, but it can break someone's heart, and it can break someone's career and their lives. So as a leader, if you're in a leadership position, always make sure that you understand how to communicate with people, how to understand what is conflict, how to understand emotional intelligence, how self-aware are you. Self-awareness doesn't come overnight.
Sure.
It takes time and experience, but it's one of the biggest leadership qualities that you need. And make sure that you think twice before speaking. As the old cliche of 2 ears, 1 mouth, it's really my mantra to live by. I often, you think you want to say something and you hold back and you think twice. And even if you just reword what you want to say, positive speaking, positive language. People are not interested in what you can't do. They're interested in what you can do. So even if I can't do something, if you had to ask me, Brian, could you come back at 4 o'clock for another meeting? And I'm busy at 4 o'clock. I'll say, Alec, what I can do is see you at 4:30.
Right.
As opposed to saying, oh, I can't do it at 4. Just rewording that sentence to what I can do is, whether it suits you or not, it sounds better. It makes you feel better, because if everybody's going around saying, no, 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 I can't, or unfortunately, the world becomes a negative place. So positivity, and remember, leadership is an action. So take charge.
I think that's a fantastic way to finish the show. If people want to find out more in the last 30 seconds, tell us where people can find out more about Brian Barry.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a website, brianbarry.ie, and there's a about me page, and you can just fill out that form. It comes straight to me. You can also email me, brian@brianbarry.ie. That's the old-fashioned way. You can hook up via LinkedIn on social media. I'm not a great fan of Twitter, but I have an account there. Facebook as well. The Facebook here in Europe doesn't really give you much. So LinkedIn is the best place, or an email address. So try those two. Brian@brianbarry. That's Barry with an A, much like the T, and Brian with an I. An
Thank you very much.
for detail. Isn't that so, Alec?
Yeah. What a great way to finish the show. A special thanks to Brian Barry for coming into the You and Your Business studio. Thanks also to Stephen on sound. The podcast of today's show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company, and please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 1 o'clock, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business.